3 small children stood in front of me with no one else willing to take them. When my sister Rachel died, Emma, Luke, and baby Sofia had nowhere to go. My parents said they were too old, my brother called them a burden, and together they chose convenience over blood. But I refused to abandon them to the foster system. 2 years later, a man with DNA proof knocked on my door. And when I learned who he really was, my family's betrayal became the most expensive mistake of their lives. Before we dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've experienced family betrayal, hit that like button, you're not alone. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I was 25 years old when my world completely changed on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work at the marketing firm in downtown Chicago where I had been employed for 3 years when my phone rang with a call that would alter the course of my life forever. The voice on the other end belonged to Detective Maria Santos from the Illinois State Police, and her words hit me like a physical blow. "Miss Walsh, I'm calling about your sister, Rachel Walsh. There has been an accident." Rachel was only 28 years old, just 3 years older than me, but we had lived completely different lives since our teenage years. While I had chosen the conventional path of college, career, and stability, Rachel had always been the free spirit of our family. She traveled constantly, worked various jobs that allowed her flexibility, and lived with an intensity that both worried and amazed those who knew her. "What kind of accident?" I managed to ask, though my hands were already trembling. "A multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 57 near Champaign. Miss Walsh, I am very sorry to inform you that your sister did not survive her injuries." The phone slipped from my hands, clattering to the kitchen floor of my small apartment. Rachel was gone. My complicated, beautiful, frustrating sister who called me at random hours to share stories from her latest adventure was never coming home again. But Detective Santos was not finished delivering devastating news. "Miss Walsh, there is another matter we need to discuss. Your sister was traveling with 3 young children at the time of the accident. They survived with minor injuries and are currently at Mercy General Hospital. According to our records, you are listed as their emergency contact." 3 children. I knew Rachel had a daughter named Emma, who was 7 years old, but I had not seen her in over a year. Rachel moved frequently and communication between us had become sporadic. The idea that there were 2 other children completely unknown to me was overwhelming. "I will be there as soon as possible," I told Detective Santos, though I had no idea how I was going to handle any of this. The drive to Champaign took 3 hours, during which I called my parents and my older brother Trevor to inform them about Rachel's death and the situation with the children. Their responses revealed everything about their characters that I should have understood long before that day. My mother, Patricia Walsh, was 58 years old and worked as a real estate agent in our hometown of Springfield, Illinois. She had always been critical of Rachel's unconventional lifestyle, viewing her daughter's choices as a reflection of poor parenting. When I explained about the 3 children, her immediate reaction was practical rather than compassionate. "3 children, Jennifer. That is impossible. We cannot possibly manage 3 children at our age. Your father and I are planning to retire next year. We have worked hard to reach a point where we can enjoy our lives without the stress of raising children again." My father, Robert Walsh, was a high school principal who prided himself on logical decision-making and orderly solutions to complex problems. His response was equally disappointing but predictably systematic. "We need to contact Child Services immediately," he said when I called to update him. "These children need proper care from trained professionals. This is not a situation that can be handled informally within the family." But it was my brother Trevor's reaction that hurt me the most. Trevor was 31 years old, married to his college girlfriend Amanda, and worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in Springfield. He had always been the responsible one in our family, the child our parents pointed to as an example of success and stability. "Jennifer, you have to be realistic about this," Trevor said when I called him from the hospital parking lot. "You are 25 years old, single, and barely making enough money to support yourself. Taking care of 3 kids is not like pet-sitting for a weekend. These children have been through trauma, and they need resources that none of us can provide." "They are Rachel's children," I protested. "They are our family. They are Rachel's responsibility, and she should have made proper arrangements for their care instead of assuming we would step in, Trevor replied coldly. The kindest thing we can do for these kids is ensure they get placed with families who are actually equipped to raise them. That conversation took place in the hospital hallway while 3 traumatized children waited in a room down the hall, wondering what would happen to them next. Emma, who was 7 years old with Rachel's curly brown hair and bright blue eyes, had not spoken since the accident. Luke, who was 5 years old with sandy blonde hair and freckles across his nose, kept asking when his mama was coming back. Baby Sofia, who was only 18 months old with dark hair and enormous brown eyes, cried constantly for her mother. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, explained the legal situation to me with gentle professionalism. Rachel had listed me as the emergency contact for all 3 children, but there was no formal custody arrangement in place. The state could take temporary custody and place the children in foster care while legal matters were sorted out, or a family member could petition for emergency guardianship. Do you know anything about the children's fathers? Mrs. Chen asked as we sat in her small office. I know Emma's father left when Rachel was pregnant, I said, trying to remember details from conversations that had taken place years earlier. Rachel never talked much about him. I do not know anything about the fathers of the younger children. That complicates the legal situation, Mrs. Chen explained. Without information about the biological fathers, and with no other family members willing to take responsibility, these children could remain in the foster system indefinitely. That evening, I sat in Rachel's hospital room where her personal belongings had been collected. Among her things, I found a worn notebook filled with her handwriting. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered that Rachel had been more organized than any of us realized. She had detailed information about each child's medical history, favorite foods, fears, and comfort routines. She had also written letters to each of them, apparently planning to give them the letters when they were older. The letter she had written for Emma brought tears to my eyes. My beautiful Emma, you are so smart and brave. I know I have not always been the mother you deserved, but I have loved you every single day since you were born. I hope you remember our adventure days and know that everything I did was because I wanted to show you how big and beautiful the world can be. For Luke, she had written, Sweet Luke, you have the kindest heart of anyone I have ever known. You take care of everyone around you, even when you are scared. I hope you always remember to be gentle with yourself the way you are gentle with others. And for baby Sofia, my little sunshine, you came into our lives when we needed joy the most. Your smile can light up the darkest days. I hope you grow up knowing how much love surrounds you. Reading those letters, I realized that Rachel had been a better mother than our family had given her credit for. She had loved these children fiercely, even if her methods had been unconventional. And now they had no one except relatives who viewed them as inconveniences to be managed rather than family members to be cherished. The next morning, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I called Mrs. Chen and informed her that I wanted to petition for emergency guardianship of all 3 children. Are you certain about this, Miss Walsh? She asked. Raising 3 children as a single parent is extremely challenging under the best circumstances. These children have also experienced significant trauma that will require ongoing support and therapy. I am certain, I replied, though truthfully I was terrified. They are my family, and I will not let them be separated or placed with strangers. The legal process for emergency guardianship took 5 days, during which I took leave from my job and stayed with the children at a temporary placement facility. During those 5 days, I watched Emma slowly begin to trust me enough to speak in whispers. I learned that Luke had nightmares every night and needed to sleep with a light on. I discovered that Sofia had been walking for several months and could say a few words, including mama and bye-bye, which she repeated constantly. When my family learned about my decision to seek guardianship, their reactions ranged from disappointment to outright anger. My mother called me while I was sitting in the courthouse waiting for our hearing. Jennifer, this is a mistake that will ruin your life. You are giving up your career, your independence, and any chance at a normal relationship. These children need professional care, not good intentions from someone who has never raised children before. I'm not giving up my life, Mom. I am choosing to build a different kind of life, I replied, watching Emma color in a coloring book while Luke played quietly with toy cars nearby. "You are being naive," my mother continued. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to raise 3 children? Food, clothing, medical care, education. You make $35,000 a year. That is not enough to support 4 people." My father's call came an hour later, and his approach was more direct. "We cannot support this decision, Jennifer. If you choose to take on this responsibility against our advice, you will be doing it without our financial or emotional support. We raised our children, and we are not prepared to help raise another generation." But it was Trevor's reaction that cut the deepest. He drove to the courthouse to confront me in person, bringing Amanda with him for moral support. "You are making an emotional decision that you will regret for the rest of your life," Trevor said as we stood in the courthouse hallway. "These kids have been through trauma that you are not equipped to handle. You have no experience with children, no resources to provide for them properly, and no support system to help you through the difficult times." Amanda nodded in agreement. "Trevor and I have been talking about having children of our own, but we are waiting until we are financially stable and emotionally ready. You are taking on 3 children without any of that preparation. So you think I should just abandon them?" I asked, my voice rising with frustration. "I think you should let trained professionals find them homes with families who actually want children and can provide for them properly," Trevor replied. "That is not abandonment. That is recognizing your limitations and doing what is best for these kids." "What is best for these kids is staying together and staying with family," I said firmly. "Rachel trusted me enough to list me as their emergency contact. She wanted me to take care of them if something happened to her." "Rachel was not exactly known for making responsible decisions," Amanda said quietly, but her words carried the weight of years of family judgment. That comment triggered something inside me that I had not realized was there. For years, I had listened to my family criticize Rachel's choices, her lifestyle, and her parenting without defending her. I had allowed them to treat her like the black sheep while positioning themselves as the responsible, respectable members of the family. But watching her children struggle with the loss of the only parent they had ever known made me see Rachel's love and dedication in a new light. "Rachel loved these children more than you have ever loved anyone," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She may not have lived the way you wanted her to, but she was a good mother who put her children first. And if you cannot see that, then you do not deserve to be part of their lives." The guardianship hearing took place on a Friday afternoon. Judge Margaret Thompson reviewed the case file, interviewed me about my intentions and resources, and spoke briefly with each of the children to assess their comfort level with the arrangement. "Miss Walsh," Judge Thompson said as she prepared to make her ruling, "taking custody of 3 young children is a significant responsibility that will impact every aspect of your life. Are you prepared for the financial, emotional, and practical challenges that lie ahead?" "Your Honor, these children have already lost their mother. I will not let them lose the rest of their family as well. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to give them a stable, loving home," I replied. Judge Thompson granted emergency guardianship, with a review scheduled for 6 months later to assess the permanent custody arrangement. As we left the courthouse that afternoon, Emma took my hand for the first time since the accident. "Are we going to live with you now?" she asked quietly. "Yes, sweetheart. We are going to be a family," I told her, though I had no idea how I was going to make that promise work. The first challenge was housing. My 1-bedroom apartment was barely large enough for me, let alone 3 additional people. Using the small amount of money I had in savings, I was able to secure a 3-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood with good schools. The rent was nearly double what I had been paying, which meant that my entire budget needed to be restructured. I contacted my supervisor at the marketing firm to explain the situation and request a modification to my work schedule that would allow me to be home when the children were not in school. My supervisor, Carol Martinez, was sympathetic but realistic about the limitations of what the company could offer. "Jennifer, I understand the situation you are facing, and I admire your commitment to these children," Carol said during our meeting. "However, this is a demanding job that requires flexibility and availability. I can offer you part-time hours for now, but there will be a corresponding reduction in your salary and benefits." Part-time salary meant $20,000 per year instead of $35,000. With rent, utilities, food, and basic necessities for 4 people, I was looking at monthly expenses that exceeded my income. But I had made a commitment to these children, and I was determined to find a way to make it work. During the first month in our new apartment, I learned more about parenting than I had thought possible. Emma was struggling in school, having difficulty concentrating and experiencing frequent nightmares about the accident. Luke had developed separation anxiety and would panic if I left him with anyone else, even for short periods. Sofia was going through a normal toddler phase complicated by grief she could not understand or express. I found a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, Dr. Sarah Kim, who agreed to see all 3 children and provide guidance for me as their guardian. The sessions were expensive, but I considered them essential for the children's healing process. Grief in children this age presents differently than adult grief, Dr. Kim explained during one of our sessions. Emma understands that her mother is gone, but she may blame herself for the accident or worry that other people she loves will also disappear. Luke knows something is wrong, but he may not fully understand the permanence of death. Sofia is too young to understand, but she feels the absence and disruption in her routine. The financial pressure was constant and overwhelming. I applied for assistance programs, researched grants for single guardians, and took on freelance marketing projects during evenings and weekends. But every month was a struggle to cover basic expenses, and I had no safety net for emergencies. My family's promised lack of support proved to be absolute. They did not call to check on the children, did not offer to babysit during difficult days, and made it clear that they considered my decision to be my problem to solve. When Emma asked why she never saw her grandparents anymore, I struggled to explain their absence without damaging her already fragile sense of security. But despite the challenges, there were moments of pure joy that reminded me why I had made this choice. Emma's first genuine laugh 6 weeks after the accident. Luke's proud announcement that he had made a friend at his new school. Sofia's first attempts to call me Jen when she could not pronounce Jennifer. As we approached the end of our first year together, I realized that while my life had become infinitely more complicated, it had also become infinitely more meaningful. These children had taught me about resilience, unconditional love, and the strength that comes from being needed. We had created our own family traditions, found our rhythm as a household, and built a life that was chaotic but filled with love. Little did I know that a knock on our door would soon change everything we thought we knew about our future together. The man standing on our doorstep would carry proof that would alter not only our understanding of the children's history, but also reveal just how much my birth family had underestimated the value of what they had chosen to abandon. Our second year together brought new challenges that tested every aspect of our makeshift family structure. Emma, now 8 years old, was excelling academically but struggling socially at Riverside Elementary School. Her teacher, Mrs. Rebecca Foster, was a compassionate woman in her 40s who had been teaching 3rd grade for 15 years. She called me in for a conference that October to discuss Emma's difficulty connecting with her classmates. Emma is one of the brightest students I have ever taught, Mrs. Foster explained as we sat in her colorful classroom after hours. Her reading comprehension is at a 6th grade level, and her mathematical reasoning is exceptional. But she isolates herself during recess and lunch, preferring to read alone rather than participate in group activities. She has been through a lot of trauma, I said, choosing my words carefully. Her mother died in a car accident, and she witnessed the event. It may take time for her to feel comfortable forming new attachments. Mrs. Foster nodded with understanding. I suspected there was something significant in her background. She occasionally makes comments that suggest she has experienced loss beyond what most children her age encounter. Have you considered additional counseling or support groups for children who have lost parents? The suggestion was reasonable, but additional therapy meant additional expenses that I was already struggling to manage. Dr. Kim's sessions cost $150 per child per week, which meant $600 monthly for all 3 children. Even with a sliding scale discount, the therapy expenses consumed nearly a quarter of my reduced income. Luke, who had just turned 6, was having his own adjustment difficulties at Riverside Elementary. His kindergarten teacher, Mr. James Wellington, was a recent college graduate with enthusiasm that sometimes overwhelmed Luke's sensitive personality. During our parent-teacher conference, Mr. Wellington expressed concerns about Luke's attention span and emotional regulation. Luke seems to have difficulty staying focused during structured activities, Mr. Wellington explained, showing me examples of Luke's incomplete worksheets. He also becomes very upset when routines change unexpectedly. Yesterday, when we had a fire drill during art time, he cried for 20 minutes and could not be consoled. He has always been sensitive to changes in routine, I explained. Since his mother's death, he has needed predictability to feel secure. Are there ways we can help him prepare for schedule changes in advance? Mr. Wellington was willing to work with Luke's needs, but he suggested that Luke might benefit from evaluation for attention or anxiety disorders. The idea of additional medical appointments and potential medication added another layer of complexity to our already overwhelming schedule. Sofia, now 2.5 years old, was attending Little Sprouts Daycare Center while I worked. The director, Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez, was a grandmother of 6 who had been running the daycare for over 20 years. She had infinite patience with Sofia's emotional outbursts and separation anxiety, but she was also honest about the challenges Sofia presented. Sofia is a delightful child with a wonderful personality, Mrs. Rodriguez told me during our monthly check-in meeting. But she still has episodes where she becomes inconsolable, especially during transitions or when she sees other children with their parents. She asks for her mama frequently, and it breaks my heart that I cannot give her the answer she wants. These conversations with teachers and caregivers reminded me constantly that I was navigating uncharted territory without a roadmap. I had no previous experience with childhood development, trauma recovery, or educational advocacy. Every decision I made felt like guesswork with potentially lasting consequences for 3 vulnerable children. The financial pressure had become so intense by our second winter together that I was forced to take on additional work beyond my part-time marketing position. I started freelance projects for small businesses, working on website development and social media campaigns during evenings and weekends. The additional income helped cover basic expenses, but it meant that I was working almost constantly when the children were asleep. My neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, was a retired teacher in her 70s who lived in the apartment next door. She had noticed the children playing in our small shared backyard and gradually became an unofficial grandmother figure in their lives. Mrs. Patterson would invite Emma to help her tend to her herb garden, teaching her about different plants and their uses. She played simple card games with Luke, helping him develop patience and concentration skills. And she delighted in Sofia's attempts to communicate, always responding with enthusiasm to her limited vocabulary. "You are doing an exceptional job with those children," Mrs. Patterson told me one evening when I was bringing in laundry from the building's shared basement. "I raised 4 children of my own, and I can see the love and stability you provide for them. Do not let anyone tell you differently." Her validation meant more to me than she could have known. During moments when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility or questioned my ability to provide everything the children needed, Mrs. Patterson's encouragement reminded me that love and commitment were often more valuable than material resources. But there were also moments when the isolation from my birth family felt particularly painful. When Emma lost her first tooth and excitedly wanted to call her grandparents to share the news, I had to explain that they were very busy and could not talk right now. When Luke scored his first goal in the recreational soccer league I had enrolled him in, I was the only family member cheering from the sidelines. When Sofia took her first steps in our apartment, there was no one to call and share the milestone. My former colleagues at the marketing firm occasionally reached out to check on my situation, but those conversations often highlighted how dramatically my life had changed. My former work friends, Jessica and Amanda, were both single women in their 20s who spent their evenings at restaurants and bars, their weekends traveling or attending social events. Their concerns about my situation, while well-intentioned, often made me feel even more isolated. "You could still have a social life if you got a regular babysitter," Jessica suggested during one of our rare phone conversations. "There are plenty of college students who would watch the kids for a reasonable rate." But the idea of paying for babysitting felt impossibly luxurious when I was already struggling to cover basic necessities. Every dollar had to be allocated carefully between rent, groceries, utilities, and the children's needs. Entertainment and social activities had become rare treats rather than regular parts of our routine. The most challenging aspect of our financial situation was the constant stress of living without a safety net. When Sofia developed an ear infection that required urgent care, the emergency room visit cost $300 that I did not have. When Luke outgrew his winter coat in the middle of January, I had to choose between buying him a new coat and paying our electricity bill on time. When Emma's glasses broke during a playground accident, replacing them meant eating rice and beans for 2 weeks to cover the expense. I applied for every assistance program available, but the qualification process was complicated and time-consuming. Food stamps helped with grocery expenses, but the application required documentation that took weeks to gather and process. Medicaid covered the children's basic medical needs, but finding providers who accepted the insurance often meant long wait times for appointments. Housing assistance had a waiting list that stretched for months, with no guarantee of approval. During particularly difficult weeks, I questioned whether my family had been right about my inability to provide adequate care for the children. When Emma came home from school asking why her classmates had birthday parties at expensive venues while we celebrated at home with homemade cake, I wondered if she would have been better off with adoptive parents who could provide material advantages I could not offer. But then Emma would curl up next to me while I read bedtime stories, or Luke would spontaneously hug me and say, "I love you, Jennifer." Or Sofia would bring me dandelions she had picked from our small yard, and I would remember why I had made this choice. These children needed love and stability more than they needed material wealth, and I was providing that in ways my birth family had never been willing to consider. As we approached the 2-year anniversary of Rachel's death, I noticed changes in all 3 children that indicated healing and growth. Emma had begun participating in class discussions and had made 2 close friends who regularly invited her for playdates. Luke's nightmares had become less frequent, and he could now handle minor changes in routine without becoming overwhelmed. Sofia's vocabulary had expanded dramatically, and she had started using Jennifer instead of crying for Mama when she needed comfort. Dr. Kim praised the progress all 3 children had made during our sessions. "The stability and consistency you have provided has been essential for their healing process," she told me during one of our family sessions. Children who experience early trauma often struggle with attachment and trust, but these children clearly feel secure in their relationship with you. But it was Emma's comment during one of our evening conversations that best captured the transformation that had taken place in our unconventional family. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, helping Luke with his homework while Sofia played with blocks nearby. "Jennifer," Emma said quietly, "I miss Mama, but I'm glad we get to stay together. Some kids at school whose parents died had to go live with different families, and they do not see their brothers and sisters anymore. I am glad we get to stay together too," I replied, feeling tears well up in my eyes. That was always the most important thing to me. Luke looked up from his math worksheet. "Are we going to live with you forever?" "As long as you want to," I promised, though legally I knew the situation was more complicated than that simple answer suggested. The permanent custody hearing was scheduled for the following month, exactly 2 years after the emergency guardianship had been granted. Judge Thompson would review our situation and make a final determination about the children's legal status. I had been working with a family attorney, David Chen, who had agreed to handle the case pro bono after learning about our circumstances. "The judge will want to see evidence that the children are thriving in your care," Attorney Chen explained during our preparation meeting. "School reports, medical records, therapy progress notes, and character references will all be important. You should also be prepared to answer questions about your long-term financial stability and support system." Long-term financial stability was exactly what I lacked, and my support system consisted primarily of Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Kim. My birth family had maintained their distance for the entire 2 years, never calling to check on the children or offering any form of assistance. When I had reached out to them for character references for the custody hearing, their responses had been disappointing but not surprising. My mother's written statement was polite but lukewarm. "Jennifer has always been a responsible young woman who tries to do the right thing." While I remain concerned about the practical challenges of her situation, I can see that she cares deeply for these children. My father's reference was more direct. "Jennifer made a decision against our advice, but she has followed through on her commitment. The children appear to be adequately cared for, though I continue to believe they would benefit from more traditional family structures. Trevor declined to provide a reference at all, explaining through a brief phone call that he did not feel comfortable making recommendations about a situation he still disagreed with fundamentally. But the character references from Dr. Kim, Mrs. Foster, Mr. Wellington, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Mrs. Patterson painted a picture of a loving, stable home environment where 3 children were healing and thriving despite challenging circumstances. It was during this period of preparation for the permanent custody hearing that our lives took an unexpected turn. On a Wednesday evening in late February, I was helping Emma with a science project about the solar system while Luke practiced reading aloud and Sofia played with educational toys in the living room. The domestic scene was peaceful and routine, exactly the kind of evening that had become precious to me over the past 2 years. The knock on our apartment door was firm and professional, different from the casual visits from Mrs. Patterson or the occasional package delivery. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive-looking dark suit holding what appeared to be a briefcase. He looked to be in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and an authoritative presence that immediately made me nervous. "Miss Jennifer Walsh?" he asked when I opened the door with the chain still attached. "Yes, that is me. Can I help you?" "My name is Richard Morrison, and I am a private investigator. I would like to speak with you about the children in your care, specifically about their biological father." My heart rate immediately increased. The permanent custody hearing was only 3 weeks away, and the last thing I needed was complications related to unknown biological fathers appearing to claim parental rights. "I am sorry, but I do not have any information about their father," I said, beginning to close the door. "Miss Walsh, I believe you misunderstand my purpose," Mr. Morrison said quickly. "I am not here on behalf of Child Services or any legal authority. I represent a man who has been searching for these children for over 3 years. A man who has never stopped believing that someday he would find his son and daughters." The words son and daughters stopped me cold. This man was claiming that all 3 children shared the same biological father, something that had never occurred to me during the 2 years I had been caring for them. "I think there has been some mistake," I said. "These children have different fathers." Mr. Morrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder containing what appeared to be photographs and documents. "Miss Walsh, I understand this is shocking information, but I have been tracking your sister's movements for the past 9 years. I have evidence that proves all 3 children were fathered by my client." He showed me photographs of Rachel with a man I did not recognize, taken at various locations and times. The photos appeared to be candid shots, the kind taken by someone who was documenting a relationship rather than capturing formal portraits. In several of the images, Rachel was visibly pregnant, and the dates on the photos corresponded to the timeframes when she would have been carrying each of the children. "Who is your client?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Alexander Blackwood, and he is the CEO of Blackwood Industries," Mr. Morrison replied. "He met your sister 9 years ago, and they had an on-and-off relationship that lasted until approximately 6 months before her death. He has been searching for her and the children ever since she disappeared from his life." The name Blackwood Industries was familiar, though I could not immediately place where I had heard it. Mr. Morrison must have noticed my confusion because he continued with additional information that would change everything I thought I knew about our future. "Miss Walsh, Mr. Blackwood is worth approximately $4.7 billion. He owns one of the largest technology companies in the United States, and he has been using every resource at his disposal to locate his children. If these children are indeed his biological offspring, which DNA testing can easily confirm, they are the heirs to one of the largest private fortunes in America." I stood in my doorway, holding 3 photographs of Rachel with a man I had never seen before, while 3 children who had become my entire world played innocently in the background. Everything I had built over the past 2 years, every sacrifice I had made, every moment of joy and struggle we had shared as a family, suddenly felt precarious in a way I had never imagined. The man at my door represented possibilities that could transform the children's lives in ways I could never provide. But he also represented the potential loss of the family we had created together, and the possibility that my birth family's prediction about my inability to care for these children properly might prove to be irrelevant in the face of a biological father with unlimited resources. "I need time to think about this," I told Mr. Morrison, my hands trembling as I held the photographs that seemed to prove Rachel had been living a completely different life than any of us had known. "Of course," Mr. Morrison replied, his voice gentle but persistent. "However, I should mention that Mr. Blackwood is prepared to provide immediate financial support for the children's care while DNA testing is being arranged. He understands that you have been shouldering this responsibility alone, and he wants to ensure the children's needs are being met regardless of the legal outcome." The offer of financial support felt like both a blessing and a threat. On one hand, the children desperately needed resources that I could not provide. On the other hand, accepting money from a man who might be their biological father could complicate the custody situation in ways I was not prepared to handle. "Can I have your contact information?" I asked. "I need to discuss this with my attorney before making any decisions." Mr. Morrison handed me an elegant business card with embossed lettering. "Mr. Blackwood is staying at the Fairmorn Hotel downtown while this matter is being resolved. He would very much like to meet the children, but he understands that must be arranged carefully and with proper legal guidance." After Mr. Morrison left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the photographs and trying to process what this revelation meant for our family. Emma, Luke, and Sofia continued their evening routine, unaware that their entire future might be about to change. Emma was reading a chapter book about magic kingdoms, Luke was building elaborate structures with his blocks, and Sofia was attempting to brush the hair of her favorite doll. I called Attorney Chen immediately, reaching him at his home office despite the late hour. "This changes everything about the custody case," he said after I explained the situation. "If DNA testing proves that Alexander Blackwood is the biological father of all 3 children, he will have superior legal claim to custody. The question becomes whether he wants to exercise that claim, or if he is willing to formalize some kind of shared arrangement." "What does that mean for me?" I asked, watching Sofia toddle around the living room in her pajamas. "It depends entirely on his intentions and his assessment of your relationship with the children," Attorney Chen replied. "Some biological parents in similar situations are grateful for the care that has been provided and want to maintain stability for the children. Others prefer to start fresh with new arrangements." That night, I lay awake thinking about Rachel and trying to understand how she had managed to keep such a significant relationship secret from our entire family. The man in the photographs looked to be in his 40s, well-dressed and clearly wealthy based on the expensive restaurants and locations where the photos had been taken. Rachel appeared happy in the images, more settled and content than I remembered seeing her during family visits. The next morning, I called in sick to work and arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch the children while I met with Attorney Chen at his office. He had spent the early morning hours researching Alexander Blackwood and Blackwood Industries, and the information he had gathered was staggering. Alexander Blackwood founded Blackwood Industries 12 years ago, starting with software development and expanding into artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and biomedical research, Attorney Chen explained as he showed me printouts from business magazines and newspaper articles. The company went public 5 years ago and is now worth over $20 billion. Blackwood himself owns approximately 30% of the company, plus significant investments in other ventures. The timeline aligned perfectly with Rachel's pregnancy and the children's ages. According to the business articles, Alexander Blackwood had maintained a relatively low public profile despite his wealth, avoiding the social scene that many billionaires embraced. He had never been married and had no publicly known children, which explained why Mr. Morrison had been searching so extensively for Emma, Luke, and Sofia. "What kind of person is he?" I asked, studying a Forbes magazine cover featuring Alexander Blackwood in a sleek business suit. "By all accounts, he is legitimate and ethical in his business practices," Attorney Chen replied. "His company has received recognition for fair labor practices, environmental responsibility, and charitable giving. Personally, he seems to avoid publicity and controversy. This could work in your favor if he proves to be reasonable about the children's best interests." We arranged for DNA testing to be conducted at a certified laboratory that afternoon. The process was simple and non-invasive, requiring only cheek swabs from each child. I explained to Emma and Luke that we needed to do a test to learn more about their family history, avoiding details that might confuse or worry them. Sofia was too young to understand what was happening but cooperated with the gentle technician who collected her sample. The laboratory promised results within 72 hours, which meant we would know the truth by Friday afternoon. During those 3 days of waiting, I found myself constantly watching the children and wondering what their lives might look like if they suddenly had access to unlimited resources and opportunities. Emma could attend the best private schools in the country, receive tutoring from experts in every subject that interested her, and travel to places she had only read about in books. Luke could work with specialists who understood his sensitive temperament and help him develop confidence in social situations. Sofia could have educational advantages from her earliest years that would prepare her for any future she might choose. But they could also be separated from the only stable home they had known since their mother's death, placed with a father who was essentially a stranger, and thrust into a world of wealth and privilege that might not prioritize the emotional connections we had built together. On Thursday evening, Dr. Kim called to check on how the children were handling the uncertainty surrounding the DNA testing. "I have not told them what the testing is really about," I explained. "They think it is just routine medical care. Should I be preparing them for the possibility that their lives might change dramatically?" Children this age can sense when adults are anxious, even if they do not understand the specific reasons, Dr. Kim replied. "It might be helpful to acknowledge that some changes could be coming while reassuring them that they will continue to be loved and cared for regardless of what happens." That evening, I sat down with Emma and Luke after Sofia had gone to bed to have an age-appropriate conversation about our situation. "Do you remember how I explained that your mama had relationships with different people throughout her life?" I began carefully. Emma nodded. "You said that is why Luke and Sofia and I have different daddies." "Well, it turns out that might not be true," I continued. "There is a man who thinks he might be the daddy of all three of you, and we did the test this week to find out if that is correct." Luke's eyes widened with interest. "Will we get to meet him?" "If the test shows that he is your biological father, then yes, you will probably get to meet him," I replied. "But no matter what the test says, you will always be my children, and I will always love you and take care of you." Emma, who had always been more perceptive than her years suggested, asked the question I had been dreading. "If he is our real daddy, will we have to go live with him instead of you?" "I do not know what will happen," I admitted. "But I promise that I will always fight for what is best for you, Luke, and Sofia. And what is best is for you to stay together and be loved." Friday afternoon, Attorney Chen called with the DNA results. My hands were shaking as I answered the phone, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the direction of our lives. "The test results are conclusive," he said. "Alexander Blackwood is the biological father of all three children. Jennifer, this man is one of the wealthiest individuals in America, and these children are his legal heirs." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, watching Sofia play with her toys while Emma and Luke colored at the table. These children, who had been abandoned by my own family as burdens too difficult to manage, were actually the children of a billionaire who had been searching for them desperately. "What happens now?" I asked. "Mr. Blackwood has requested a meeting for tomorrow morning," Attorney Chen replied. "He wants to meet the children and discuss arrangements for their future. I strongly recommend that I accompany you to this meeting to ensure your rights are protected throughout the process." Saturday morning, I dressed the children in their best clothes and tried to prepare them for a meeting that could change everything about their lives. Mrs. Patterson offered to watch Sofia, thinking the meeting might be too overwhelming for a toddler, but I wanted all three children present so that Alexander Blackwood could see the family unit we had become. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a conference room at Attorney Chen's law firm. When we arrived, Alexander Blackwood was already there with Mr. Morrison and a woman who introduced herself as Margaret Stevens, his personal attorney. Alexander Blackwood was exactly as he appeared in the photographs Mr. Morrison had shown me, but seeing him in person revealed details that pictures could not capture. He was tall, probably 6'3", with graying brown hair and intelligent blue eyes that immediately filled with tears when he saw the children. His expensive suit could not hide the fact that he was a man who had been searching for something precious that he thought he might never find. "Emma, Luke, Sofia," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I am Alexander. I knew your mama, and I have been looking for you for a very long time." Emma, always the most cautious of the three, stayed close to my side while studying this stranger who claimed to know their mother. Luke was more curious, stepping forward to get a better look at the man who might be his father. Sofia, unaware of the significance of the moment, was more interested in the elaborate conference room with its large windows overlooking the city. "Did you love our mama?" Emma asked directly, displaying the emotional intelligence that constantly surprised me. "Yes, I loved her very much," Alexander replied, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. "Your mama was one of the most wonderful people I ever met, and I have missed her every day since she went away." "Why did she go away?" Luke asked, his childish directness cutting straight to the heart of complicated adult relationships. Alexander glanced at me, clearly uncertain about how much these children understood about their mother's choices and the circumstances that had led to their separation. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that they think are best, even when those decisions make other people sad, Alexander explained carefully. "Your mama thought she was protecting you by taking you away, but I have never stopped wanting to be part of your lives." Margaret Stevens, his attorney, began explaining the legal situation in terms that focused on Alexander's rights as the biological father and his desire to provide for the children's futures. But I noticed that Alexander himself seemed more interested in observing the children's personalities and their comfort level with me than in discussing legal technicalities. "Jennifer has been taking care of us since Mama died," Emma announced, clearly sensing that this meeting was about more than just family introductions. "She reads us stories and helps us with homework and makes pancakes on Sunday mornings." "I can see that Jennifer loves you very much," Alexander replied, looking at me with an expression that seemed to combine gratitude and assessment. "She has done something incredible by keeping you together and taking care of you when no one else would." The comment stung because it highlighted my family's abandonment, but it also suggested that Alexander understood the value of what I had provided for his children. During a break in the formal meeting, Alexander asked if he could speak with me privately while the children played in an adjacent room under the supervision of Mr. Morrison and Mrs. Patterson, who had insisted on coming to provide moral support. "I need you to understand something," Alexander said when we were alone. "For the past 3 years, I have been imagining this moment and trying to plan what I would do if I found my children. I always assumed they would be in foster care or adopted by strangers. I never imagined they would be with someone who clearly loves them as much as you do." "They are remarkable children," I replied, unsure where this conversation was leading. "They are remarkable, and they are also clearly thriving in your care," Alexander continued. "Emma is confident and articulate, Luke is sensitive and thoughtful, and Sofia is joyful and secure. Those qualities do not develop in children who are not loved and nurtured properly." I waited for him to continue, sensing that he was working toward some kind of proposal or decision. "I want to be part of their lives," Alexander said. "I want to provide for them, give them opportunities, and build relationships with each of them. But I do not want to destroy the family you have created or traumatize them by removing them from the only stable home they have known since their mother's death." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting a partnership," Alexander replied. "I want to adopt you as part of this arrangement. Not romantically," he added quickly, "but as a co-parent who continues to provide the daily care and emotional support these children need while I provide resources and opportunities that can enhance their lives." The proposal was unlike anything I had anticipated. Instead of a custody battle or forced separation, Alexander was offering a way for the children to maintain stability while gaining access to advantages I could never provide. "I would want to establish a trust fund for each child that ensures their educational and future needs are met," Alexander continued. "I would also want to purchase a home large enough for all of you, in a neighborhood with excellent schools and safe spaces for the children to grow up. And I would want regular visitation time to build relationships with each of them at a pace that feels comfortable for everyone." "What about my family?" I asked, thinking about the people who had abandoned these children and me during our most difficult period. Alexander's expression hardened slightly. "From what I understand, your family chose not to be involved in these children's lives when they needed support the most. If they want to be part of our extended family now, they will need to prove that their motivations are genuine rather than opportunistic." The meeting continued for several more hours, with attorneys discussing legal arrangements, trust fund structures, and custody agreements that would formalize the co-parenting relationship Alexander had proposed. By the time we left the law office, the children had become comfortable enough with Alexander to accept small gifts he had brought for each of them and to agree to visit him at his hotel the following day. That evening, I called my parents to inform them about the day's revelations. Their responses revealed everything about their character that I should have understood years earlier. $4.7 billion, my mother repeated, her voice rising with excitement. Jennifer, do you realize what this means for our family? We will have access to connections and opportunities that most people can only dream about. This is not about our family, Mom, I replied. This is about 3 children who needed support when you refused to provide it. We made practical decisions based on the information we had at the time, my father interjected, clearly attempting to rewrite history. If we had known about the children's inheritance potential, our calculations would have been different. Their inheritance potential? I asked, stunned by his choice of words. These are your grandchildren, not investment opportunities. Trevor's reaction was even more telling when he called an hour later. I think we should arrange a family dinner to welcome Mr. Blackwood into our extended family, he suggested. Amanda and I would love to help facilitate relationships between the children and their broader family network. Where was this interest in family relationships when the children needed you most? I asked. We are trying to move forward positively, Trevor replied. Everyone makes mistakes, but this is an opportunity for healing and growth for all of us. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The same family members who had considered 3 traumatized children too burdensome to support were now eager to be part of their lives because of their connection to wealth and privilege. But the most revealing conversation came from my mother 3 days later, when she called to suggest that I should consider stepping back from my caregiving role now that the children's real father had been found. You have done a wonderful job, sweetheart, but these children deserve to be raised with advantages that only their biological father can provide, she said. It might be selfish to keep them in a modest apartment when they could be living in a mansion with access to the best schools and opportunities money can buy. I am not keeping them anywhere, I replied angrily. Alexander and I are working together to provide them with both emotional stability and material advantages. The children will benefit from having multiple adults who love them and want what is best for them. But you have to admit that you are not really their mother, my mother pressed. Biology matters, and these children have a real father who can give them everything they need. That comment crystallized everything I had learned about my family's values over the past 3 years. They measured relationships in terms of biological connections and financial benefits rather than love, sacrifice, and commitment. They viewed the children as burdens when those children needed care, and as opportunities when those same children gained access to wealth. Alexander proved to be everything his business reputation suggested. He was patient with the children's adjustment to having him in their lives, respectful of the routines and relationships I had established, and generous in providing resources without trying to control how those resources were used. Within a month, he had purchased a beautiful home in an excellent school district, complete with bedrooms for each child, a library that delighted Emma, a playroom that excited Luke, and a garden where Sofia could explore safely. The trust funds he established for each child would cover their educational expenses through graduate school, with additional provisions for travel, cultural experiences, and any career paths they chose to pursue. But more importantly, he hired Dr. Kim to continue providing therapy support and made sure that Mrs. Patterson remained part of our extended family by arranging for her to live in a guest cottage on the property. As we settled into our new life, with Alexander spending several days each week with the children and gradually building the relationships he had missed during their early years, I realized that my family's abandonment had actually been a gift. If they had been part of the children's lives from the beginning, they would have interfered with the bond we had developed and potentially complicated the co-parenting arrangement that was now providing the children with the best of all possible worlds. Emma was thriving at her new school, where her academic abilities were challenged and nurtured by teachers who understood gifted children. Luke was receiving support for his anxiety while developing confidence through art classes and music lessons that helped him express himself. Sofia was attending a Montessori program that encouraged her natural curiosity while providing the structure she needed to feel secure. But the most satisfying aspect of our new situation was watching my birth family struggle to find ways to insert themselves into lives they had chosen to abandon. Their attempts to arrange family gatherings, their sudden interest in the children's activities, and their transparent efforts to build relationships with Alexander were met with polite but firm boundaries. "The children's lives are full and happy," I told my mother when she called for the 5th time in a week to suggest various family activities. "They have school, therapy, activities with Alexander, and time with the family members who have always been part of their lives. We do not have room for relationships that are based on what people hope to gain rather than what they are willing to give." Alexander supported these boundaries completely, having observed my family's absence during the children's most difficult period and their sudden reappearance once financial advantages became apparent. "Family is defined by actions, not by blood relationships or potential benefits," he told Emma one evening when she asked why her grandparents suddenly wanted to visit all the time. "The people who matter are the ones who show up when you need them, not the ones who show up when they need something from you." 6 months after Alexander entered our lives, Emma, Luke, and Sofia had adjusted beautifully to their expanded family structure. They had a father who adored them and provided opportunities they never could have imagined, a surrogate mother who had proven her love through years of sacrifice, and a stable home environment that honored both their emotional needs and their intellectual potential. For anyone watching this who has been abandoned by family members during difficult times, I want you to know that their absence can become your strength. The people who truly matter will prove their love through their actions rather than their words. And sometimes losing a family that was never really yours is the only way to build the authentic relationships you deserve. My birth family continues to make periodic attempts to gain access to our lives, but we have learned to recognize their overtures for what they really are. Their sudden interest is motivated by potential advantages rather than genuine love, and the children deserve relationships based on authenticity rather than opportunity. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Remember that family is created through commitment and care rather than biology or financial benefits. And that sometimes the people who abandon you reveal their true character in ways that ultimately protect you from future disappointment and manipulation. The children Rachel entrusted to my care have taught me that love multiplied through sacrifice becomes the foundation for unshakable family bonds. And that the most expensive mistake my birth family ever made was choosing convenience over compassion when 3 innocent children needed them most.
Echoes of a broken heart, silence grits where your promise died. I hold the ghost of the life we dreamed, but the truth cuts deeper than the lie. Every memory tastes like smoke and rain, a velvet wound that sings my pain. Echoes of a broken heart play in the dark, tear me apart. The piano cries where I used to stand. Your love still burns in my trembling hands. Echoes of a broken heart, forever bleeding, forever scarred. I kiss the ashes of what remains, love's perfume turned into chains. The saxophone moans in the midnight air, telling stories you'll never care. every sign